Hi, I'm Laureline. My sister spit in my soup ate a celebration for our mother's recovery. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I just switched the bowls. She ended up in the ER that night. But that wasn't the real betrayal. The real betrayal was years of being erased from family photos, menus, memories. They said I was too sensitive, said I was imagining things, until the cameras proved otherwise. Have you ever realized your family was rewriting history without you in it? What would you do if the people who were supposed to love you made you invisible? I showed up late on purpose. Not late enough to raise eyebrows, just enough to keep them from focusing on me. The valet barely looked at me as I stepped out of my car. Inside the restaurant, the lighting was warm, golden, curated for Instagram memories and fabricated laughter. A boutique French spot nestled along the edge of Santa Rosa's more polished neighborhoods, Celine's kind of place. Expensive without screaming for it, pretentious without needing to try. As soon as I walked through the front, I caught Celine's voice before I even saw her. It rose above the music like it always did, smooth and just loud enough to signal ownership of the room. She was in full performance mode, when seen the act 100 times over. I smiled thinly at the hostess and made my way toward the private dining area. The long table was set with tall crystal glasses, folded linen napkins, and place cards in looping gold script. Mine had been pushed slightly off-center. Not torn, not missing, just off. Like me. "Look who finally made it," Celine called, standing to greet me with arms open and a smile too symmetrical to be sincere. We were about to send out a search party. I leaned in for the obligatory air kiss. "Well, lucky for me, you didn't. I'd hate to be a missing person at my own mother's celebration." She chuckled lightly, eyes flicking over my dress, her mouth curving in a practiced smirk. "You look comfortable." I didn't take the bait. Instead, I greeted our mother sitting like a glass figurine at the head of the table, delicate and over-decorated. She squeezed my hand a little too tightly, as if that made up for what she wouldn't say. I slid into my chair-own of the few without direct sightlines to the center. Naturally. As the dinner began, I floated, smiled, nodded, laughed at the stories being told about Celine's latest professional campaign like I hadn't been the one who helped edit the damn pitch deck 2 years ago. I wasn't here to claim credit. I was here to be present. Soup was the first coarse creamy butternut squash, with a swirl of creme fraiche and toasted pepitas. It arrived silently in front of me. The server's hands were swift and trained, leaving behind aroma and anticipation. I excused myself to the restroom, needed a break from the soft buzz of social performance, from the corners of the room, from the way my mother kept adjusting her pearls every time someone praised Celine. When I returned, something subtle off-caught my eye. A shift in posture, a quietness in Celine's grin. She leaned forward, her hand barely brushing the rim of my soup bowl. Her lips moved. Then it happened. A quick, deliberate motion, so slight it could have been missed, if not for the mirror behind the wine chiller reflecting everything. Celine spit into my soup. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a slip. It was a statement. She didn't know I saw. I stood there for a second, hands at my sides, stomach turning not because of the soup. Because of the history behind that spit. Because of every eye roll, every undermining comment, every story she retold where I was the punchline. Because of every time she told someone, "Laureline? Oh, she's just around." I walked back to the table like nothing had happened, took my seat, smiled as a guest complimented the flower arrangements. And then, without pause, I reached forward and switched our bowls. She was too caught up laughing at her own joke to notice. I didn't eat. She did. Her spoon dipped, swirled, lifted. Her smile was radiant as she savored her sabotage, unaware that the joke, this time, wasn't mine. I stared at my untouched bowl, letting the silence fill me. Not the room's silence mine. The kind that held decades. The time she told my high school boyfriend I cheated on him, he left me for her. The way she accidentally stole my graduation speech by getting a nosebleed during my turn. The time she RSVP'd for both of us to a cousin's wedding, but forgot to give me the invite. I'd swallowed every slight. Let her take center stage. Let her write the family's narrative with my name left out of the cast list. But not tonight. I wasn't going to flip the table. I wasn't going to scream. That's not the kind of woman I am. That's not the kind of woman I've ever been allowed to be. But I would remember this moment. Celine lifted her glass for a toast. To Mom, she said, and to second chances. Everyone clinked. I didn't. Instead, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, let her swallow what she served. The soup may have been swallowed, but the aftertaste stayed with me, thicker than the butternut, heavier than the silence I'd wrapped myself in. I sat through the rest of that first course with a smile that felt stapled to my face, nodding at comments I wasn't invited to respond to. My sister laughed like she hadn't just crossed a line that couldn't be redrawn. The room shifted slowly. More guests filtered in as the main dinner hour approached. Family I hadn't seen in years. College friends of Celine's, and what looked like newer acquaintances, business partners maybe. The kind who wear their net worth in watch bands and polished veneers. Celine floated from person to person, arm hooked into our mother's, both of them glowing in curated grace. Introductions started. Of course, Celine led. This is our dear friend Tara, VP at Sterling & Co. She and Cormac go way back. Uncle Ron and Aunt Bev flew in from Arizona, bless them. She reached one hand toward me, barely glancing over. And that's Laura Linnamy's sister. She's always helping behind the scenes. My name passed like lint. No pause, no warmth. Just an obligatory note in her performance script. I stayed near the bar, sipping sparkling water and counting the seconds until I could go home. A woman I didn't recognize approached, smiling in that too polite way. Her dress screamed money, and her tone was laced with entitlement, masquerading as charm. "Excuse me," she said, glancing at the glasses on a tray near me. "Would you mind topping this off? I think we're low on champagne at the back table." I blinked. "Sorry?" Before I could say anything more, Celine appeared like she'd been summoned. "Oh no, Nosha's not with catering," she said with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. "She's family. But she's always keeping things running." The woman gave a half smile and walked off like nothing had happened. A few others nearby chuckled lightly, the way people do when they're uncomfortable but don't want to rock the boat. I smiled too. That's what I was supposed to do. Inside, something cracked. It wasn't new. It had been cracking for years. But this time, I didn't try to patch it. I wandered toward the back of the room, stood beside a framed print of our family crest, and let my eyes blur over the gold lettering. The music hummed. Silverware clinked. People toasted and laughed and called out Celine's name like she was the mayor of the damn place. I remembered the graduation party. Mine. The one where she had a last-minute appendicitis scare and everyone forgot why we were there. Or the time Mom gave Celine the necklace that belonged to Grandma, even though she had promised it to me when I was 16. Or when my name was misprinted on a wedding program lorry instead of Laureline, and no one ever corrected it. When you've been misnamed enough times, I thought, you stop correcting people. I wasn't essential. I was nice to have around. I was reliable. I was the one who could be counted on not to make things messy. I turned and saw Veda, my daughter, standing at the far end of the room with a plate of fruit in one hand, quietly watching. 14 years old, curious eyes taking in everything. That's when the thought hit me hard. If I keep swallowing this, what is she learning about how women should be treated in families like ours? I didn't leave. I didn't cry in the restroom. I stayed, planted, watching, waiting. Celine was mid-conversation with someone when a server approached me with a small folded menu. "I believe this is yours," he said gently. I unfolded it. Every name printed in gold foil, arranged by course and seat. Mine was there scribbled in last, with black ballpoint ink, crooked and fading. Not printed, not planned, scribbled. It wasn't just my name that was missing. It was pieces of me cut out, erased, blurred at the edges like it'd only ever been a shadow. I sat there holding the menu like it was evidence in a trial, and in a way, it was. Everyone else's name was elegantly printed, engraved in gold cursive that shimmered under the warm glow of the chandeliers. Mine, scribbled in shaky ballpoint pen, tilted, rushed, smudged. As if someone had added it last minute, reluctantly, with no time to spare. I brushed a fingertip over the ink. It was still damp. A young server, probably no older than 22, leaned in as he cleared a nearby plate. He glanced at the menu, then lowered his voice. "Your sister finalized the list this morning," he said, with an apologetic shrug. "Guess your name didn't make the print run." I didn't flinch, didn't speak. I just gave him a slow nod and folded the menu in half, creasing the edge like I was sealing away a piece of the truth I already knew. Across the room, Selene was mid-laugh, head tossed back, surrounded by people who had always adored her. She was retelling a story I remembered clearly, because it had been mine once, but she was the one shining now, passing it off as if it belonged to her. That was her gift. Take what want hers, polish it with charm, and present it like a family heirloom. I slipped away from the table. The party had spilled into the adjacent lounge, where someone had mounted a canvas collage for guests to admire. A sweeping title scrolled across the top in fancy script. Legacy, a decade of love. At first, I kept my distance. Then I felt myself drawn in, one hesitant step after another. I scanned the photo snapshots from birthdays, holidays, graduations, and backyard barbecues. All familiar, all real. But I wasn't in them, or rather, I was barely. A blurry silhouette in the background here, the back of my head there. One frame showed me setting up chairs while Selene posed front and center, beaming with a wine glass raised like a trophy. I stared at that one the longest. A cousin drifted up beside me, holding a mimosa. She squinted at the collage. "Were you not at the 2016 reunion?" "I think that's the only one you're missing from." "I was there," I said softly. She blinked. "Oh, maybe you just didn't get in any pictures." "No, I took the pictures." I stepped back, the collage warping before my eyes. It no longer felt like family history, it felt like a stage play. A curated narrative where the spotlight had always been pre-assigned. And I was the lighting crew, never meant to be seen. There was a time, not too long ago, when I would have laughed it off, tossed out some line about being camera shy or better behind the scenes. But the ache in my chest said otherwise. These weren't simple oversights. These were choices. Repeated, deliberate choices. And the most painful part? I had let them happen. I looked around the room. These were people I'd known my whole life. People I'd driven to the hospital, helped move apartments, covered bills for. They were sipping champagne, complimenting the decor, enjoying the food, every bit of which I had quietly helped coordinate and fund. But no one mentioned that. No one even glanced in my direction. They remembered Selena's speech, her dress, her curated smile. And once again, I stood there, present in body, invisible in every other way. A ghost with a pulse. I returned to my seat, but something in me had shifted. I pulled out my phone and opened a message to Veda, my mentee, who'd been struggling with a toxic work situation. "Don't let anyone shrink you into a supporting role in your own life," I wrote. "Not your boss, not your friends, and especially not your family." I hovered for a moment. Then I hit send. When I looked up, Selene was walking toward me, phone in hand, smile wide, too wide, the kind of smile that wasn't meant for me but for the audience watching. "Ready for group photos?" she called out, her voice bright and loud enough to draw attention. "Let's make sure everyone's in this time." Everyone. Her eyes didn't meet mine, but her message did. And this time, I didn't smile back. Some of us had already learned how to stay out of frame. I stood back, arms loosely crossed, as Selene posed dead center in every photo. She shifted slightly with each click, changing angles like she was prepping for a magazine spread. No one seemed to notice I wasn't in the shot. No one asked. I wasn't angry yet. Just removed. Detached. The way someone becomes after 100 cuts too small for anyone else to see. Dessert was being cleared when it happened. One moment, Celine was smiling. The next, she stumbled forward, her wineglass shattering against the floor. Her body hit the ground like a sack of porcelain. A murmur surged through the room, followed by gasps and chairs scraping back. Cormac reached her first, crouched low, calling her name in a voice that tried hard to sound calm but cracked at the edges. People hovered. Waitstaff radioed for assistance. I stayed still. And then it started, the whispers. Is she allergic to something? Did she eat anything unusual? Someone else, quieter, leaned in to a neighbor. I saw her switch bowls during the soup course. That got everyone's attention. I turned my head slowly. That's all it took. One glance from me, and suddenly every eye was asking the same silent question. A few minutes later, I was asked, more like nudged into a hallway behind the main dining room. Irene stood there with that pressed lip smile she used when she wanted something unpleasant to pass without incident. Beside her, 2 aunts whose names I barely used anymore. And Cormac, arms folded, eyes avoiding mine. You were sitting next to her, one aunt said, voice syrupy. We just want to be sure everything's okay. Cormac added, Did anything happen during dinner? Any chance she was stressed? You know how she internalizes things. I looked at each of them, one by one. Their expressions were painted concern. But I've lived too long not to recognize performance when I see it. I swapped our bowls, I said, calm as glass. Because she spit in mine. No one spoke. Irene blinked. What do you mean? She leaned over and spit into my soup when she thought I wasn't looking. So I switched the bowls. That doesn't sound like Celine, one of the aunts muttered, as if that meant anything. She didn't know I saw her, I continued. But I did, in the wine chiller's reflection. And I didn't feel like eating whatever she thought I deserved. Cormac shifted his weight, suddenly very interested in the tile floor. Irene opened her mouth, but I raised my hand slightly. Don't explain it away. Don't tell me she was under pressure or trying to be funny. She did it because she could. Because she's always been able to. I'm sure there's a misunderstanding, Irene said. Too quick, too polished. I tilted my head. Do you think I'm lying? No, she said slowly. But it just doesn't make sense. It never has, I replied. But I'm done making room for it. The silence was thicker now, not awkward exposed. I won't apologize, I said evenly, for refusing to eat her cruelty. It was the first time it said something like that, and not second-guessed it. I didn't care how it sounded. I didn't care if it made anyone uncomfortable. For the first time, I didn't need them to believe me. I believed myself. I turned and walked back toward the dining room, passing the stunned faces of guests who had heard only pieces and filled in the rest. The music had stopped. Forks rested untouched. People stared as I re-entered, not dramatically, just present. Let them watch. But they weren't the only ones watching that night. Veda had been standing by the far window when I returned to the dining room, her small frame almost hidden behind a curtain. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Her eyes told me everything she saw me, fully. And for the first time, that was enough. The room never truly recovered from my confession. Conversations quieted, glances sharpened, but no one dared bring it up again, not openly. Even Cormac couldn't meet my gaze. Celine, of course, was escorted out by staff and an ambulance within minutes. She wasn't unconscious, just overwhelmed. Or so they said. It didn't matter. Back in the hallway, I felt a shadow fall beside me. Irene. She said nothing at first, just stood there, arms crossed as if shielding herself from a wind that never blew. After a moment, she sighed. You've always been so sensitive. I didn't respond. There was no point. I waited for an apology, for a flicker of recognition. But all I got was a mother trying to patch over a crack in the drywall with duct tape. Later that evening, I found myself sitting near the nurse's station at the hospital, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee in hand. I heard my mother's voice echo from down the hall as she spoke to a nurse behind the check-in counter. "She's Selena's sister," the nurse said, pointing my way. "Next of kin?" Irene hesitated. "Selene is the oldest. And the other daughter, oh, Laura?" My name caught in her throat like an afterthought. "Laureline?" I corrected softly. The nurse nodded with a gentle smile. My mother didn't flinch. She just turned away. We returned home just before midnight. Veda went upstairs without a word, her face tired in a way that felt too old for 14. I wandered into the guest room, the one that used to be mine, before Selene turned it into a storage closet for party supplies and off-season clothes. I stood still for a while before moving toward the bottom drawer of the old writing desk, the one that stuck halfway and always needed a gentle kick. Inside was a mess of old birthday cards, mismatched batteries, and a stack of faded envelopes wrapped in a rubber band. I flipped through them absent-mindedly until one stopped me. My name. Handwritten in that delicate, careful script Irene reserved for Christmas cards. It was sealed, dated 11 years ago. I opened it. "Laureline, I know I treat Selena differently. She needs praise. You just manage. Sometimes I think you don't need me. And maybe I've used that as an excuse to step back. But I do notice. Even if I don't say it, I notice you hold things together when no one else does." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing. I read it twice, then again. The letter didn't rewrite the past. It didn't excuse the name mistakes or the silences, but it cracked something open in. Understanding I hadn't wanted, but maybe needed. Some wounds weren't just about being forgotten. They were about never being seen in the first place. I sat on the edge of the bed, letter still in hand, thinking about how many times it swallowed pride, let moments pass, let people laugh. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in that burning, helpless way. I was tired, but I was clear. I pulled out a small frame from the bottom drawer, a cheap one, meant for an old photo. I slipped the letter inside and placed it on the nightstand. Not to forgive, but to remember, and to stop rewriting it in my head. Before going to bed, I walked down the hallway and slid a folded note under Veda's door. "Your name will never be misplaced in this family, not while I'm alive." I turned off the lights, ready to finally rest. As I closed the drawer, another voice startled me from behind. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," I said, "and you're not ready for what I kept." I didn't flinch. Not when Selene hissed my name like it was beneath her teeth. Not when she spat out her last line like she still had the final word. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I walked past the valet stand, heels crunching softly against the gravel path. There was no anger left in me. No need to scream. What I felt now wasn't rage, it was clarity. I wasn't running away from a confrontation. I was walking straight toward something I'd held onto for weeks. Something precise. Something undeniable. Proof. The night air was cool against my skin as I slid into my car and started the engine. I drove back across town, my hands steady on the wheel, headlights slicing through the quiet. The restaurant parking lot was almost empty by then, the party long over, but I could see a few staff cleaning up through the windows. The manager, a man named Theo, was behind the bar, stacking glasses. He looked up as I walked in. "Miss? I need 5 minutes. Alone, if possible." He hesitated, uncertain. "Is something wrong?" "Depends," I said. "Do you still keep surveillance footage from the dining room?" He straightened. "There's one camera, above the wine display." "Why?" "I think you already know." 10 minutes later, we were in a small office behind the kitchen, the kind of space that smelled faintly of bleach and old receipts. A monitor blinked to life. Theo pulled up the footage from earlier that afternoon, time-stamped and silent. We watched. There she was, Selena dressed in cream silk and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned over the table casually, as if adjusting the silverware. but her eyes darted to the left, to the right. Then, in one slow, deliberate movement, she tilted her head and spit into my bowl. Not a joke, not a mistake, a decision. She straightened, laughed to herself, and sat down like nothing had happened. My jaw didn't clench. My hands didn't shake. I just kept watching. Another angle showed her waving to the waiter. She pointed to her head, mimed a quick motion with her fingers, as if something had slipped her mind. The waiter nodded. A few minutes later, he returned with a different bowl, slightly lighter broth, different garnish. Her soup. 2 bowls, 1 message. She knew exactly what she was doing, and exactly which one was meant for me. I turned to Theo. "Can I get a copy?" He looked at me for a long moment, then pulled out a USB stick from a drawer. "I don't want to be involved." "You're not," I said softly. "You're just showing me what's already been done." He handed it over. I left with a quiet thank you and walked into the night. Back home, the house was still. Veda was asleep. I moved silently through the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and opened my laptop. I slid the USB in and hit play again, not because I needed to, but because part of me still didn't believe it. And yet, there it was. Frame by frame, her intent, her betrayal. I emailed it to myself twice. Once to my main account. Once to a private cloud I rarely used. Then, I sent it to my lawyer with a message that read, "Just in case this escalates." I opened the family group chat, the same thread where they sent photos of Selini's new kitchen renovation and ignored my messages for weeks. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed, "Subject," for anyone who's curious. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I created a folder on my desktop. Selini Truth. Inside, I dropped the video. Then I opened my phone's gallery and started capturing screenshots, clear ones. Her face. Her gestures. The moment the bowls were switched. I started a checklist on paper. Print visuals, draft timeline, call attorney again. Tell Veda the full truth before it goes public. I sat there, at the edge of my bed, rereading the message that I hadn't sent. Again. And again. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It wasn't even about shaming her. It was about reclaiming something she had tried to steal me name. My voice, my dignity. This time, I wouldn't let it slide. Morning came, soft and silver, like the calm after a storm. I hadn't slept much, but I felt awake, clear, grounded, ready. At 7:32 a.m., the family group chat lit up. "Cormac, we need to talk. Tonight. All of us." I didn't answer. I just smiled. They had no idea what had already set in motion. They had no idea what had already set in motion. By the time I pulled into Celine and Cormac's long, too-perfect driveway, the sun was starting to melt into the trees. Golden light flickered off the manicured lawn, and the house stood there pristine, curated, almost smug. White candles glowed from each window, and not a single trace of life a toy, a stray shoe, even a smudge on the glass dared exist out of place. It was exactly how Celine liked it. Flawless from a distance, hollow once you stepped inside. I didn't turn off the engine, just sat there, staring. Next to me, Veda adjusted her seatbelt but said nothing. Her presence was steady, like a grounding wire. "You don't have to come in," I told her. She glanced at the house, then at me. "I won't. Unless you call. If I hear your voice crack, I'm coming through that door." I nodded. We didn't need more words than that. I stepped out, my phone tight in my hand, like a weapon not for attack, but for surgery. I wasn't walking into a conversation. I was walking into a final extraction. What I planned to cut out today wasn't Celine or even Cormac. It was something older, something that had been growing quietly inside me for years. The need to be accepted by people who thrived off my erasure. When I opened the front door, they were already arranged like a theater set. Irene was curled in her usual spot on the couch, her posture rigid, her lips pressed so thin they nearly disappeared. Cormac stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, acting neutral as if he weren't part of all this. And Celine sat front and center, like a child trying to look innocent while hiding a broken vase behind her back. Cormac began. We're all here because things have gotten a little out of hand. Nobody wants this kind of tension. We thought maybe it's time to talk things through. Together. Celine chimed in, her voice soft and sweet, coated in her usual artificial grace. It's just all been so confusing, really. I think we can all admit emotions were high. I almost laughed. That tone, that expression. I'd seen it all before. The innocent act, the fake mediation. She wasn't confused. She was performing just like always. I didn't reply. I raised my phone and tapped once. Before or after this? The screen lit up. I turned it toward them. A screenshot of the family group text, clear as day, projected on the living room TV. One message, under Celine's name, sent just before the gallery event. Let her sit in the back. It's where she belongs. No one moved. Celine blinked first. That was meant for Cormac. I thought I was texting him privately. You didn't delete it, I said, cutting her off. You didn't apologize. You left it there like a name tag, like a label I was supposed to accept. A long, jagged silence followed. Not defensive, not remorseful, just caught. Irene glanced at Celine, but said nothing. Celine started to fumble through an excuse stress, planning, miscommunication, but I didn't let her finish. I tapped the phone again. A new file. This time, it airdropped directly to the television. The video started playing. Volume low, but clear enough. It had been recorded by Veda during the gallery opening. Celine, standing near the bar, leaned in toward a server and said, "Don't let her drink. She'll embarrass us again." The words landed like a slap, but it wasn't just the words. It was her expression. That small, smug smirk, the tone of superiority. Gasps rippled from the hallway. One cousin, who had apparently come late and stayed quiet in the corner, stood up and left without a word. Cormac's jaw tensed. Irene didn't blink, but her face shifted ever so slightly. She hadn't believed I had proof. Now she did. I stepped forward. Calm, measured. I didn't come here to argue. I came to end the pretending. I've been called dramatic, difficult, too sensitive, when really, I've just been too quiet for too long. Celine's eyes glistened. She opened her mouth, likely to cry on cue. But no one moved to console her. Not this time. Cormac finally spoke, more to the room than to me. This could have consequences. I turned to him. For whom? The one who lies and excludes, or the one who finally stops accepting it? He had no answer. I faced Irene. My mother. My mother, who once told me I was her anchor, then watched while I was shoved off the boat. She didn't look away, but she didn't defend me either. I'm done keeping the peace, I said. Not if it means swallowing poison. I turned toward the door. That's when Selena broke. Her voice rose, sharp and cracking. You think this is over? I stopped. One hand on the doorknob. I turned back, steady as stone. No, but your version of it is. And with that, I stepped out into the evening air. The sky was darker now, but I didn't feel heavy. For once, the weight wasn't mine. And I had no intention of ever carrying theirs again. Some endings don't need an invitation. They just need a witness. I wasn't planning to go to the dinner. Not at first. But after I sent the message to the family group thread with everything, every receipt, every buried truth I'd quietly collected, something in me shifted. The thread lit up within 30 minutes. Reactions poured in like nervous weather. A thumbs up from my aunt. A heart from my cousin. A shocked face from someone I didn't even know still had me on notifications. But what stood out the most was the silence. No one defended Celine, not even my mother. And that silence? It didn't hurt for once. It landed like a long-awaited breath, like someone had opened a window in a house that'd gone stale with secrets. Still, I got in the car. Still, I went, not for closure. Closure is a myth people chase when they want neat endings. This wasn't about healing or reconciling. This was about standing in the room, looking everyone in the eye, and letting them feel the weight of what had finally surfaced. I didn't want to hear secondhand stories or warped versions passed through wine-soaked whispers. I wanted to see it for myself, the unraveling. The table was set when I arrived, too carefully. Polished silverware, candles too tall for comfort. There were place cards this time. Mine actually had my name on it, no aliases, no extra guest. Just Laureline. I sat at the end of the table. Not tucked away, not front and center. Just solid, present. Celine wasn't there. Apparently, she'd been admitted to a hospital nearby earlier that morning, under observation, someone muttered. The word around the table was food poisoning, and of course, I saw the flickers of suspicion behind a few glances. As if the timing wasn't suspicious in itself. Veda sat beside me, her posture quiet and unshaken. She had aged a decade in the last week, but not from sadness, from clarity. There's something about watching your mother reclaim her place that redefines the word strength for a daughter. Midway through the main course, Cormac approached me with that politician's tilt to his jaw. His voice was soft, rehearsed. "Laureline," he said, "if this continues to escalate, no one wins." "Is that a threat?" I asked, without flinching. He gave a tight smile. "It's just the truth." I met his eyes, sharp and steady. Then let the truth do the talking. I returned to my seat. A few moments later, the room shifted. Dr. Ansel Grove entered through the side door uninvited, but clearly expected by someone. A hush fell over the table. Even the knives stopped scraping. He wasted no time. "Ms. Calloway experienced an adverse reaction to a stimulant compound," he said flatly. "It's something often found in over-the-counter weight loss supplements. It was worsened by alcohol and heightened stress. I want to be clear. It was not food-related." He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. A few people exhaled. Others glanced at one another. The narrative shifted. Celine's absence, once ominous, now looked more like a calculated retreat than a medical emergency. A curtain pulled back just enough to show the strings. Under the table, Veda's hand found mine. I didn't look down, but I squeezed it once. That was enough. As plates were cleared and a thin fruit tart arrived for dessert, a woman I barely recognized floated over to me. One of Celine's friends, perfectly toned, glass of red wine in hand, and a smile stretched too wide to be sincere. "You handled that really well," she said. "Honestly, after everything with the divorce, I wasn't sure you'd bounce back." I looked at her, held her gaze just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Good thing," I replied softly. "I wasn't bouncing for anyone but myself." She blinked, confused, and gave a polite laugh, like it told a joke she didn't quite understand. Then came the final toast. "There's always one." I stood, lifting my glass not high, just enough. My voice didn't tremble. "To Celine," I said evenly. "May we all heal, honestly." The silence after was brief. A few clinks, a few nods. No applause. Then I walked forward and placed a small stack on the table. I didn't explain it. I didn't need to. A copy of the evening's menu, my name handwritten in by my own hand. A printout of the family photo collage, the one that made the rounds last Christmas, with a red circle around the only blurry, cut-off photo of me. Everyone else had 10 shots. I had a shoulder. And one final page. A quote from a letter my mother had written, but never sent. "Sometimes I think you don't need me. But maybe I've been wrong." I didn't look up. I didn't explain the quote, or where I found it. I turned to leave. As I reached the doorway, someone behind me, maybe a cousin, maybe one of the cousins' partner called out, "Where are you going?" I paused, hand on the doorframe. My voice was calm. "Home," I said. Finally. And I meant it. But leaving the table didn't mean I left the hunger behind. I walked into the night air after that dinner and let the door close behind me, not looking back. The restaurant's lights dimmed behind glass like a distant stage gone dark. For once, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't wondering how they'd spin it. I wasn't even rehearsing comebacks in my head. It was done. And I was done. A week passed. Quietly. Celine didn't call. Neither did Cormac. The group chat that once buzzed with birthday plans and passive-aggressive updates about holiday logistics had gone silent. Not even an emoji. Then Irene called. Not to ask how I was. Not to revisit the letter or acknowledge the documents I'd laid bare in front of the family. She asked if I was coming to brunch. "They miss you," she said, like I was a casserole dish gone missing from the buffet line. I told her gently, "I think I'll sit this one out, maybe for good." She didn't argue. Just paused, then said, "Well, the chair will be there if you change your mind." That Sunday, they gathered without me. I didn't ask, but Veda peeked at a cousin's Instagram story. One photo showed the long brunch table. 12 seats filled. One chair left empty, a coffee cup untouched in front of it. For her, someone had written in the caption. Irene had apparently said, "I was just going through a phase. She's always been difficult," she'd added, "always needing to feel seen." No one noticed it was the same chair that used to have Celine's gold nameplate, the same one I was never invited to sit in. Days later, Celine posted a throwback on social media, an old photo from a Christmas party a decade ago. She captioned it, "Remember when I saved Christmas dinner with that last-minute dessert?" I stared at the screen. That dessert was mine. I had made it from scratch when the store bought one she'd promised to bring thawed into mush in the trunk of her car. No one thanked me that night, just compliments for Celine for thinking ahead. Even now, the truth was a photo edited after the moment had passed. I didn't comment, didn't correct her. I just shut my phone off and took a walk with Veda along the trail by the bay. She kicked pebbles with the toes of her sneakers while I breathed in the salt and wind. "You okay?" she asked after a while. I looked down at her. "Being remembered isn't the same as being known," I said. "You deserve both." She didn't reply. Just reached for my hand and held it without squeezing. That evening, Celine received notice of an internal ethics review at her PR firm. I wasn't told directly, but word got around. Someone had submitted clips and edited footage, screenshots, witness statements. There were no lawsuits, no public takedown, but there were whispers, meetings she was left out of, invitations that stopped arriving, distance, soft and slow. She'd always valued image. It was strange to watch her become invisible on her own stage. At a writing group session I joined at the library, the topic of the week was unsent truths. Everyone brought letters they never mailed. I brought Minimi Mother's, the one that had gathered dust in the drawer for over a decade. I didn't read it aloud. I just held it while others shared theirs. Afterward, I tucked it back into my bag and made a copy. Some wounds don't close with time. They close when we stop hoping they never opened. Sometimes, the deepest healing doesn't come from being right. It comes from finally being heard. I spent years staying quiet, thinking silence made me strong. But silence doesn't protect you, it erases you. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Speak your truth before someone else rewrites it for you. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, I hope this story reminds you that your voice matters, that your name matters, and most of all, that you don't have to earn your place at a table built with your hands. Let me ask you, have you ever been treated like a background character in your own story? If so, how did you reclaim your voice? Share with me in the comments. Let's talk about it. If this video touched your heart, leave it in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, let me know why. I welcome every honest opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more true stories that go beyond the surface. Your support helps these voices be heard.